Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our read aloud of Dracula by Bram Stoker in this new red-spined hardcover penguin. We are up to chapter 20. All of our team has assembled, and they are working now to thwart Dracula himself, with having received many warnings from Abraham Van Helsing about just how dangerous that is. Dracula is not a human. He is not a normal being. He is a supernatural being with, as Van Helsing has now said twice, the strength of 20 men in his hands. We've already seen the extent of that strength. So, very dangerous outcoming, and they are talking about it that way. The men involved are talking about it that way as a dangerous expedition on which Mina Harker, Jonathan Harker's wife, has no real place. They don't feel she's up to it. They worry that it will fray her nerves, and they don't want to be worrying about her. And only the last one makes any sense. And now we are up to chapter 20, in which our characters are going to be a lot concerned with the boxes of earth that they have just recently gone into Carfax Abbey and seen the boxes of earth that Dracula has put there, and also noticed how many of them aren't there, and they were besieged momentarily by a plague of rats that are obviously under Dracula's control. We're going to get a follow-up to that now in this chapter. And when we're reading this chapter, I want you to draw a distinction between a writer who is writing about characters who are wasting their time versus a writer who is wasting your time. Those aren't the same thing. They don't have to be. So we start off with Jonathan Harker's journal for October the 1st in the evening. I found Thomas Snelling in his house at Bethnal Green, but unhappily he was not in a condition to remember anything. The very prospect of beer, which my expected coming had opened to him, had proved too much, and he had begun too early on his expected debauch. I learned, however, from his wife, who seemed a decent poor soul, that he was only an assistant to Smollett, who, with the two mates, was the responsible person. So off I drove to Walworth and found Mr. Joseph Smollett at home and in his shirt sleeves taking a late tea out of a saucer. He is a decent, intelligent fellow, distinctly a good, reliable type of workman, and with a headpiece of his own. He remembered all about the incident of the boxes, and from a watchful dog-eared notebook which he produced from some mysterious receptacle about the seat of his trousers. It's called a pocket, Jonathan Harker. It's called a pocket. In which had hieroglyphical entries in the thick, half-obliterated pencil, he gave me the destination of the boxes. There were, he said, 6 in the cartload which he took from Carfax and left at 197 Chicksand Street, Mile End, Newtown, and another 6 which he deposited at Jamaica Lane, Bermondsey. If then the Count meant to scatter these ghastly refuges all of his over London, these places were chosen as the first of delivery, so that later he might distribute more fully. The systematic manner in which this was done made me think that he could not mean to confine himself to 2 sides of London. He was now fixed on the far east of the northern shore, and on the east of the southern shore, and on the south. The north and west were surely never meant to be left out of his diabolical scheme, let alone the city itself, the very heart of fashionable London in the southwest and west. I went back to Smollett and asked him if he could tell us if any of the other boxes had been taken from Carfax. So this is important to note. Jonathan Harker is not just noting where these boxes are, he's noting where they are. He's noting their significance on the map. Dracula is putting his boxes in strategic locations around the city of London. Obviously so that he will be able to move at will at any time and still have refuge in one of these places. But also, it speaks to his hunting activities, to his turning of the undead activities. It's not just where he's going to sleep. And this is Smollett's reply. Unfortunately, we get a little bit of regional dialect. Well, Governor, you've treated me very handsome. I had given him half a sovereign. And I'll tell you all I know. I heard a man by the name of Blocksmith say 4 nights ago in the Aaron Owns that Pincher's Alley as to how he and his mate had a rare dusty job of the old house in Purfleet. There ain't many such jobs as this 'ere, and I'm thinking that maybe Sam Blockson could tell ye summat. I asked if he could tell me where to find him. I told him that if he could get me the address, it would be worth another half sovereign. So he gulped down the rest of his tea and stood up, saying that he was going to begin and search then and there. At the door, he stopped and said, "Look here, Governor, there ain't no sense in me a-keeping you here. I may find Sam soon or I mayn't, but anyhow, he ain't like to be in a way to tell ye much tonight. Sam is a rare one when he starts on the booze. If you can give me an envelope with a stamp on it and put your address on it, I'll find out where Sam is to be found and post it to you tonight. But you'd better be up and arter it soon in the morning, or maybe you won't catch him, for Sam gets off Maine early. Never mind the booze the night before. Here we have the same kind of thing that was cropping up over and over again the last time inquiries were made about boxes, which is that everybody appears to be drunk all the time. This is Bram Stoker. This is Bram Stoker's view of the working class. This was all practical. So one of the children went off with a penny to buy an envelope and a sheet of paper, and to keep the change. You'd buy an envelope and a sheet of paper for a penny, and you'd get change. Reading this to you the day here in the United States on the day after the penny was discontinued by the mint. When she came back, I addressed the envelope and stamped it, and when Smollett had again faithfully promised to post the address when found, I took my way to home. Mina is fast asleep and looks a little too pale. Her eyes look as though she had been crying. Poor dear, I've no doubt it frets her to be kept in the dark, and it may make her doubly anxious about me and the others, but it is best as it is. It is better to be disappointed and worried in such a way now than to have her nerve broken. The doctors were quite right to insist on her being kept out of this dreadful business. I must be firm, for on me this particular burden of silence must rest. I shall never enter into the subject with her under any circumstances. Indeed, it may be a hard task, after all, for she herself has become reticent on the subject, and has not spoken of the Count or his doings ever since we told her of our decisions. It's not quite since then. The whole point undergirding this chapter about chasing boxes is that while everybody is out chasing clues, Dracula is making house calls to Mina Harker. But then we get another entry in his diary for the 2nd of October. A long and trying and exciting day. By the first post, I got my directed envelope with a dirty scrap of paper enclosed on which was written the carpenter's pencil in a sprawling hand, and then we get the address of where the box is. I got the letter in bed and rose without waking Mina. She looked heavy and sleepy and pale and far from well. I determined not to wake her, but that when I should return from this new search, I would arrange for her going back to Exeter. I think she would be happier in our own house, with her daily tasks to interest her, than in being here amongst us and in ignorance. I only saw Dr. Seward for a moment, and told him where I was off to, promising to come back and tell the rest as soon as I should have found out anything. I drove to Walworth and found, with some difficulty, Potter's Court, the address. Mr. Smollett's spelling misled me, for I asked for Porter's Court first, instead of Porter's Court. However, when I had found the court, I had no difficulty in discovering Corcoran's lodging house. That's the person who's going to tell him all about the boxes. All of this is about boxes, about finding boxes. When I asked the man who came to the door for the despite, he shook his head and said, I don't know him, but there ain't no such person here. I never heard of him in all my bloomin' days. Don't believe there ain't nobody of that kind living anywhere here's about. I took out Smollett's letter, and as I read it, it seemed to me that the lesson of the spelling of the name of the court might guide me. What are you? I asked. I'm the deputy, he answered, and I saw at once that I was on the right track. Phonetic spelling had again misled me. A half-crown tip put the deputy's knowledge at my disposal, and I learned that Mr. Bloxam, who had slept off the remains of his beer on the previous night at Corcoran's, had left for his work at the Poplar at 5 o'clock this morning. He could not tell me where the place of work was situated, but he had a vague idea that it was some kind of newfangled warehouse. With this slender clue, I had to start for Poplar. It was 12 o'clock before I got any satisfactory hint of such a building, and this I got from a coffee shop where some workmen were having their dinner. One of these suggested that there was being erected across Angel Street a new cold storage building, and as this suited the condition of a newfangled warehouse, I drove to it at once. An interview with the surly gatekeeper and a surlier foreman, both of whom were appeased with a coin of the realm, put me on the track of Bloxam. He was sent for on my suggesting that I would be willing to pay his day's wages to his foreman for the privilege of asking him a few questions on a private matter. He was a smart enough fellow, though rough of speech and bearing. When I had promised to pay for his information and given him an earnest, he told me that he had had 2 journeys between Carfax and a house in Piccadilly, and had taken from this house to the latter 9 great boxes, main heavy ones, with a horse and cart hired by him for the purpose. I asked him if he could tell me the number of the house in Piccadilly, to which he responded, Well, governor, I forgets the number, but it was only a few doors from a big white church, or something of the kind, not long built. It was a dusty old house, too, though nothing from the dustiness of the house we took the bloomin' boxes from. So in other words, Carfax is a lot dustier than this place, but Dracula has once again found a building. Presumably he's found a number of buildings and has not used anybody that we know of. Is he using another solicitor while he's in London? He killed Jonathan Harker's associate, and Jonathan Harker certainly isn't being employed by him. But how is he doing this business? How is he conducting business to get these houses where he can put his boxes of dirt? How did you get into the houses if they were both empty? I asked. There was the old party what engaged me a-waiting in the house at Purfleet. He helped to lift the boxes and put them in the dray. Curse me, but he was the strongest chap I ever struck, and him an old feller with a white mustache, one that thin that you would think he couldn't throw a shadow. How this phrase thrilled through me. Why, he took up his end of the box like it was a pounds of tea, and me a-puffing and a-blowing before I could end a mile. I could upend mine anyhow, and I'm no chicken either. How did you get into the house at Piccadilly? I asked. He was there too. He must have started off and got there afore me, for when I rung the bell, he opened the door himself and helped me to carry the boxes into the hall. The whole 9? I asked. Yes. There was 5 in the first load and 4 in the second. It was main dry work, and I don't so well remember how I got home. I interrupted him. Were the boxes left in the hall? Yes. It was a big hall, and there was nothing else in it. I made one more attempt to further matters. You didn't have any key? Never used no key nor nothing. The old gent, he opened the door himself and shut it again when I drove off. I don't remember the last time, but that was the beer. Again, the impression we're getting is that workmen in and around London are drunk all the time, especially when they're working. And you can't remember the number of the house? Oh, come now, Jonathan Harker. From his description, it can't be hard to find out which one it is. It can't be hard. No, sir. But you have no difficulty with that. It's an iron with a stone front and a bow on it, and its eye steps up to the door. I know them steps haven't had to carry the boxes up with 3 loafers that came round to earn a copper. The old gent gave him shillings, and they got so much they wanted more, but he took one of them by the shoulder and was like to throw him down the steps, till the lot of them went away cussing. I thought that this description I could find the house, so having paid my friend for his information, I started off for Piccadilly. I had gained a new, painful experience. The Count could, it was evident, handle the earth boxes himself. If so, time was precious, for now that he had achieved a certain amount of distribution, he could, by choosing his own time, complete the task unobserved. At Piccadilly Circus, I discharged my cab and walked westward. Beyond the Junior Constitutional, I came across the house described, and was satisfied that this was the next of the lairs arranged by Dracula. The house looked as though it had been long untenanted. The windows were encrusted with dust, and the shutters were up. All the framework was black with time, and from the iron and the paint had mostly scaled away. It was evident that up to lately there had been a large notice board on the front of the balcony. It had, however, been roughly torn away, and the uprights which had supported it still remained. Behind the rails of the balcony I saw there were some loose boards, whose raw edges looked white. I would have given a good deal to have been able to see the notice board intact, as it would, perhaps, have given some clue to the ownership of the house. I remembered my experience of the investigation and purchase of Carfax, and I could not but feel that if I could find the former owner, there must be some means of discovering and of gaining access to the house. In other words, Dracula saw a for let or for lease or for sale sign on this building, ripped it off, and did what? Did he see the sign and know that the building was untenanted and just start filling it with boxes of earth? Even at the risk that the owner might come by, see that someone's squatting there and raise the law? Or did he buy it? Did he put down money for it? We don't know. At this point, we don't know. Does he have other human cat's paws? There was at present nothing to be learned from the Piccadilly side, and nothing could be done, so I went round to the back to see if anything could be gathered from this quarter. The mews were active, the Piccadilly houses being mostly in occupation. I asked 1 or 2 of the grooms and helpers whom I saw around if they could help anything about the empty house. One of them said that he heard that it had been lately taken, but he couldn't say from whom. He told me, however, that up to the very lately there had been a notice board of for sale up, that perhaps Mitchell, Sons and Candy, the house agents, could tell me something, as he thought he remembered seeing the name of that agent on the firm on the board. I didn't wish to seem too eager, or to let my informant know or guess too much, so thanking him in the usual manner, I strolled away. It was now growing dusk, and the autumn night was closing in, so I did not lose any time. Having learned the address of Mitchell, Sons and Candy from the directory in Berkeley, I was soon at their offices in Sackville Street. keep in mind what I said at the beginning. This is not an author showing you characters wasting time. This is an author wasting your time. Everything that I have read so far could have been written by Bram Stoker in one sentence. The gentleman who saw me was particularly suave in manner, but uncommunicative in equal proportion. Having once told me that the Piccadilly house, which throughout our interview he called a mansion, was sold, he considered my business as concluded. When asked who had purchased it, he opened his eyes a thought wider and paused a few seconds before replying, "It is sold, sir." "Pardon me," I said with equal politeness, "but I have a special reason for wishing to know who purchased it." Again, he paused longer and raised his eyebrows still more. "It is sold, sir," was his laconic reply. "Surely," I said, "you do not mind letting me know so much." "But I do mind," he answered. "The affairs of their clients are absolutely safe in the hands of Mitchell, Sons and Candy." This was manifestly a prig of the first water, and there was no use arguing with him. I thought I had best meet him on his own ground, so I said, "Your clients, sir, are happy in having so resolute a guardian of their confidence. I am myself a professional man." Here I handed him my card. "And in this instance I am not prompted by curiosity. I act on the part of Lord Godalming, who wishes to know something of the property which has, he understood, lately been for sale." These words put a different complexion on affairs. He said, "I would like to oblige you if I could, Mr. Harker, and especially I would like to oblige his lordship. We once carried out a small matter of renting such chambers for him that he was the Honourable Arthur Holmwood. If you will let me have from his lordship's address, I will consult the house on the subject, and will, in any case, communicate with his lordship by tonight's post. It will be a pleasure if we can so far deviate from our rules as to give the required information to his lordship." I wanted to secure a friend and not make an enemy, so I thanked him and gave the address of Dr. Seward's and came away. It was now dark, and I was tired and hungry. I got a cup of tea at the Aerated Bread Company and came down to Purfleet by the next train. I found all the others at home. Mina was looking tired and pale, but she made a gallant effort to be bright and cheerful. It wrung my heart to think that I had had to keep anything from her, and so caused her inquietude. It's a nice word, inquietude, but it's possible that something else is causing it than you being away. Like maybe her getting the personal mental attentions of Count Dracula in a book called Dracula. Thank God, this will be the last night of her looking on our conferences and feeling the sting of our not showing our confidence. It took all my courage to hold to the wise resolution of keeping her out of our grim task. She seems somehow more reconciled, or else the very subject seems to become repugnant to her, for when any accidental allusion is made, she actually shudders. I am glad we made our resolutions in time, as with such a feeling as this, our growing knowledge would be a torture to her. I could not tell the others of the day's discovery till we were alone, so after dinner, followed by a little music to save appearances even amongst ourselves, I took Mina to her room and left her to go to bed. The dear girl was more affectionate with me than ever, and clung to me as though she would detain me, but there was so much to be talked of, and I came away. Thank God that the ceasing of telling things has made no difference between us. When I came down again, I found the others all gathered around the fire in the study. In the train, I had written my diary so far, and simply read it off to them as the best means of letting them get abreast of my own information. When I had finished, Van Helsing said, "This has been a great day's work, friend Jonathan. Doubtless we are on the track of the missing boxes. If we find them all in that house, then our work is near an end. But if there be some missing, we must search until we find them. Then shall we make our final coup and hunt the wretch to his real death." We all sat silent a while, and at once Mr. Morris spoke. "Say, how are we going to get into that house?" "We got into the other," answered Lord Godalming quickly. "But this is different. We broke house at Carfax, but we had night and a walled park to protect us. It'll be a mighty different thing to commit burglary in Piccadilly, either by day or night. I confess I don't see how we're going to get in unless that agency duck can find us a key of some sort. Perhaps we all know when you will get his letter in the morning." Lord Godalming's brows contracted, and he stood up and walked about the room. By and by he stood and said, turning from one to the other of us, "Quincy's head is level. This burglary business is getting serious. We got off once all right, but we now have a rare job on our hand, unless we can find the Count's key basket." As nothing could be well done before morning, and as it would be at least advisable to wait till Lord Godalming should hear from Mitchell's, we decided not to take any active step before breakfast. For a good while we sat and smoked, discussing the matter in its various lights and bearings. I took the opportunity of bringing this diary right up to the moment. I am very sleepy, and shall go to bed. Just a line. Mina sleeps soundly, and her breathing is regular. Her forehead is puckered up in little wrinkles, as though she thinks even in her sleep. She's still too pale, but does not look so haggard as she did this morning. Tomorrow will, I hope, mend all this. She will be herself at home in Exeter. Oh, but I'm sleepy. Maybe when you saw her face all puckered up in thought, but looking a little bit more satiated, perhaps you should have pulled down her nightgown. Then we moved to Dr. Seward's diary, back at the insane asylum, for the 1st of October. I am puzzled about Renfield. His moods change so rapidly that I find it difficult to keep touch with them, and as they always mean something more than his own well-being, they form more than an interesting study. This morning, when I went to see him after his repulse of Dr. Van Helsing, his manner was that of a man commanding destiny. He was, in fact, commanding destiny. Subjectively. He did not really care for any of the things of mere earth. He was in the clouds, and looked down on all the weaknesses and wants of us poor mortals. I thought I would improve the occasion and learn something, so I asked him, what about the flies these times? He smiled on me quite in a superior way, such a smile as would have become the face of Malvolio, as he answered me, the fly, my dear sir, has one striking feature. Its wings are typical of the aerial power of the psychic faculties. The ancients did well when they typified the soul as a butterfly. I wonder if it wears its garter's cross chart. I thought I would push his analogy to its utmost logically, so I answered, oh, it is the soul you are after now, is it? His madness foiled his reason, and a puzzled look spread over his face, as, shaking his head with a decision which I had but seldom seen in him, he said, oh, no, no, no. I want no souls. Life is all I want. Here he brightened up. I'm pretty indifferent about it at present. Life is all right. I have all I want. You must get a new patient, doctor, if you wish to study zoophagy. This puzzled me a little, so I drew him on. Then you command life. You are God, I suppose. He smiled with an ineffable benign superiority. Oh, no. Far be it from me to arrogate to myself the attributes of the deity. I am not even concerned in his specially spiritual doings. If I may state my intellectual position, I am, so far as concerns things purely terrestrial, somewhat in the position which Enoch occupied spiritually. This was a poser to me. I could not at the moment recall Enoch's appositeness, so I had to ask a simple question, though I felt that by doing so I was lowering myself in the eyes of the lunatic. And why Enoch? Because he walked with God. I could not see the analogy, but I did not like to admit it, so I harked back to what he had denied. So you don't care about life and you don't want souls. Why not? I put my question quickly and somewhat sternly on purpose to disconcert him. The effort succeeded. For an instant he unconsciously relapsed into his old servile manner, bent low before me, and actually fawned upon me, as he replied, I don't want any souls, indeed I don't. I couldn't use them if I had them. They would be no manner of use to me. I couldn't eat them, or... He suddenly stopped, and the old cunning look spread over his face like a wind sweep on the surface of the water. And, doctor, as to life, what is it, after all? When you've got all you require, and you know that you will never want, that is all. I have friends, good friends, like you, Dr. Seward. This was said with a leer of inexpressible cunning. I know that I shall never lack the means of life. I think that through the cloudiness of his insanity he saw some antagonism in me, for he at once fell back on the last refuge such as he had, a dogged silence. After a short time I saw that at present it was useless to speak to him. He was sulky, and so I came away. Later in the day he sent for me. Ordinarily I would not have come without a special reason, but just at present I was so interested in him that I would gladly make the effort. Besides, I am glad to have anything to help pass the time. Harker is out, following up clues, and so are Lord Godalming and Quincy. Van Helsing sits in my study poring over the record prepared by the Harkers. He seems to think that by accurate knowledge of all its details he will light upon some clue. He does not wish to be disturbed in the work, without cause. I would have taken him with me to see the patient, only I thought that after his last repulse he might not care to go again. There was also another reason. Renfield might not speak so freely before a third person as he and I were alone. I found him sitting out in the middle of the floor on his stool, a pose which generally indicative of some mental energy on his part. When I came in, he said at once, as though the question had been waiting on his lips, What about souls? It was evident, then, that my surmise had been correct. Unconscious cerebration was doing its work, even with a lunatic. I determined to have the matter out. What about them yourself? I asked. He did not reply for a moment, but looked all round him, up and down, as though he expected to find some inspiration for an answer. I don't want any souls, he said in a feeble, apologetic way. The matter seemed preying on his mind, and so I determined to use it. To be cruel to be kind, as it were. So I said, you like life, and you want life. Oh, yes. But that is all right. You needn't worry about that. But, I asked, how are we to get the life without getting the soul also? This seemed to puzzle him, so I followed it up. A nice time you'll have sometime when you're flying out there with the souls of thousands of flies and spiders and birds and cats buzzing and twittering and meowing all around you. You've got their lives, you know, and you must put up with their souls. Something seemed to affect his imagination, for he put his fingers to his ears and shut his eyes, screwing them up tightly, just as a small boy does when his face is being soaped. There was something pathetic in that touched me. It also gave me a lesson, for it seemed that before me was a child, only a child, though the features were worn and the stubble on the jaws was white. It was evident that he was undergoing some process of mental disturbance, and knowing how in his past moods had interpreted things seemingly foreign to himself, I thought I would enter into his mind as well as I could and go with him. The first step was to restore confidence, so I asked him, speaking pretty loud so that he would hear me through his closed ears, "Would you like some sugar to get your flies round again?" He seemed to wake up all at once and shook his head. With a laugh he replied, "Not much. Flies are poor things, after all." After a pause he added, "But I don't want their souls buzzing around me all the same." "Or spiders," I went on. "Blow spiders. What's the use of spiders? There isn't anything in them to eat or—" He stopped suddenly, as though reminded of a forbidden topic. This is twice now that he's refused to finish that phrase. It's pretty obvious to everybody what it is. So, I thought to myself, this is the second time he has suddenly stopped at the word drink. What does it mean? Renfield himself seemed aware of having made a lapse, for he hurried on, as though to distract my attention from it. "I don't take any stock at all in such matters. Rats and mice and such small deer, as Shakespeare has it, chicken feed of the larder, they might be called. I'm past all that sort of nonsense. You might as well ask a man to eat molecules with a pair of chopsticks, or as to try to interest me about lesser carnivora when I know what is before me." "I see," I said. "You want big things that you can make your teeth in. How would you like to feast? How would you like to breakfast on an elephant?" "What a ridiculous nonsense you are talking." He was getting too wide awake, so I thought I would press him harder. "I wonder," I said reflectively, "what an elephant's soul is like." The effect I desired was obtained, for he at once fell from his high horse and became a child again. "I don't want an elephant's soul, or any soul at all," he said. For a few moments he sat despondently. Suddenly he jumped to his feet, with his eyes blazing and all signs of intense cerebral excitement. "To hell with you and your souls," he shouted. "Why do you plague me about souls? Haven't I got enough to worry and pain and distract me already without thinking of souls?" He looked so hostile that I thought he was in for another homicidal fit, so I blew my whistle. The instant, however, that I did so, he became calm and said apologetically, "Forgive me, doctor, I forgot myself. You do not need any help. I am so worried in my mind that I am apt to be irritable. If you only knew the problem I have to face, and that I am working out, you would pity and tolerate and pardon me. Pray do not put me in a strait waistcoat. I want to think and cannot think freely when my body is confined. I am sure you will understand." He had evidently self-control, so when the attendants came I told them not to mind, and they withdrew. Renfield watched them go, and when the door was closed, he said with considerable dignity and sweetness, "Dr. Seward, you have been very considerate towards me. Believe me when I say I am very grateful to you." I thought it was well to leave him in a good mood, so I came away. There is certainly something to ponder over in this man's state. Several points seem to make what the American interviewer calls a story, if one could get them in proper order. Here they are, and here he lists the points. There's one that's missing, but we'll go through them. Will not mention drinking. Fears the thought of being burdened with the soul of anything. Had no dread of wanting life in the future. Despises the meaner forms of life altogether, though he dreads being haunted by their souls. Logically, all these things point one way. He has assurances of some kind that he will acquire some higher life. He dreads the consequences, the burden of a soul. Then it is a human life he looks to. And the assurance? Merciful God, the Count has been to him, and there is some new scheme of terror afoot. That is his diary entry, where in the first meeting, Renfield says, "Well, I have way too much on my mind to worry about souls." And in the second meeting, Renfield tells him, hours later, "Haven't I got enough to worry about without worrying about souls?" And in neither time, at neither moment, does Dr. Seward say, "What do you have to worry about? What do you have on your mind? What are you thinking about? What is it that's pressing on your mind and making you not want these things?" Renfield says, "Don't I have enough to worry about?" And Seward never says, "What are you worried about?" For all we know, if Seward had asked him that question, Renfield would have answered. Instead, he's got to intuit that the Count has been to him. And also, don't you run this place? You employ these wards, these men that are these attendants that come when you whistle. Presumably there are shifts of them. Can't you have someone watch Renfield's room? If you think that Count Dracula might be visiting him, might that not be a reason? Pay them a coin extra and have them watch his room? Night and day? You know exactly where he is. So if you think the Count has been to him, you know of a way to see Count Dracula in action. Anyway, he continues his journal later in the day. "I went after my round to Van Helsing and told him my suspicion. He grew very grave, and after thinking the matter over for a while, asked me to take him to Renfield. I did so. As we came to the door, we heard the lunatic within singing gaily, as he used to do in the time which now seems so long ago. When we entered, we saw with amazement that he had spread out his sugar as of old. The flies, lethargic with the autumn, were beginning to buzz into the room. We tried to make him talk of the subject of our previous conversation, but he would not attend. He went on with his singing, just as though we had not been present. He had got a scrap of paper and was folding it into a notebook. We came away as ignorant as we went in. He is a curious case indeed. We must watch him tonight." Then we get a letter from the shipping company to Lord Godalming. "My lord, we are at times only too happy to meet your wishes. We beg, with regard to the desire of your lordship, expressed by Mr. Harker on your behalf, to supply the following information concerning the sale and purchase of number 347 Piccadilly. The original vendors are the executors of the late Mr. Archibald Winters Suffield. The purchaser is a foreign nobleman, Count de Ville, who effected the purchase himself, paying the purchase notes in money over the counter, if your lordship will pardon so vulgar an expression. Beyond this, we know nothing whatever of him." Okay, so a mysterious foreign count who barely manages to disguise his name pays with cash on the barrelhead for the whole of this estate. Then we get Dr. Seward's diary resuming on the next day, the 2nd of October. "I placed in the man in the corridor last night and told him to make an accurate note of any sounds he might hear from Renfield's room, and gave him instructions that if there should be anything strange he was to call me. After dinner, when we had all gathered around the fire in the study, and Mrs. Harker having gone to bed, we discussed the attempts and discoveries of the day. Harker was the only one who had any result, and we are in great hopes that his clue may be an important one. Before going to bed, I went round to the patient's room and looked in through the observation trap. He was sleeping soundly, and his heart rose and fell with regular respiration. This morning, the man on duty reported that he was a little after midnight he was restless and kept saying his prayers somewhat loudly. I asked him if that was all, and he replied that it was all he heard. There was something about his manner so suspicious that I asked him point blank if he had been asleep. He denied sleep, but admitted having dozed for a while. It is too bad that men cannot be trusted unless they are watched. Today, Harker is out following up on his clue, and Art and Quincy are looking after horses. Godalming thinks that it will be well to have horses always in readiness, for when we get the information which we seek, there will be no time to lose. We must sterilize all the imported earth between sunrise and sunset. We shall thus catch the Count at his weakest, and without a refuge to fly to. Van Helsing is off to the Bristol Museum to look up some authorities on ancient medicine. The old physicians took account of such things which their followers do not accept, and the professor is searching for witch and demon cures that may be useful to us later. I sometimes think that we must all be mad, and that we shall wake to sanity in straitjackets. They have stepped into an alternate reality. The rest of the world would not believe anything. They have all seen enough to know that it's real. But they are alone in that. And then he makes an entry later in the same day. We have met again. We seemed at last to be on the track, and our work of tomorrow may be the beginning of the end. I wonder if Renfield's quiet has anything to do with this. His moods have so followed the doings of the Count that the coming destruction of the monster may be carried to him in some subtle way. If we could only get some hint as to what passed in his mind between the time of my argument with him and today, his resumption of fly-catching, it would afford us a valuable clue. He is now seemingly quiet for a spell. Is he? That wild yell seemed to come from his room. The attendant came bursting into my room and told me that Renfield had somehow met with some accident. He had heard him yell, and when he went to find him lying on his face on the floor, all covered with blood. I must go at once. ... That is a cliffhanger. So we get a cliffhanger. We have seen Renfield. He is obviously in some sort of contact with Dracula. We don't know how. We know that when Dr. Seward very tardily comes up with the idea of putting a man in at the door all the time, he dozes. We can assume that Dracula slumbers him, that Dracula fogs his mind so that he can talk with Renfield on his own. And Renfield's attitude changes. So he mentions at one of those 2 interviews that he has with Dr. Seward that he's been promised something. Dr. Seward doesn't follow it up. Doesn't say who promised you anything. Where did you get this promise? Doesn't say anything about what is preoccupying. What has changed your opinion of all these things? Instead, he plays word games with him. And now there's been a scream from Renfield's room. We have to stop there. We have to respect the author's wishes and stop there. That was a cliffhanger. So we will wrap this up for now, and we will move straight on to Renfield's room next time. Thank you, BookTube.